Welcome to the school board portion of the pre-town meeting.
That's another idea.
Thank you. I will take a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Jeff. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Any public comments before we get into our budget presentation? All right, then I will go over to Lewis.
Okay. So tonight we're discussing the FY26 Rutland Town budget. The budget expense is currently up by 7.5%, which is equal to $798,000. And that's made up of three main categories. Contractual salary and benefits are up by $330,000, which is 41% of the increase. Building and repairs are up $350,000, which is 44% of the total increase. And that's due to one-time capital building repairs that were added to the budget for FY26. And then secondary tuition is 14%, which is $114,000. And then all other increases are the other 1% increase. Educational spending, which is the amount we have to raise in property taxes, is up by 3.25%. And the reason between the difference between the expense and education spending is that we have two prior year surpluses that are being used to offset taxes. We have $424,000, which was a Rutland Town prior year surplus from FY24. And we have $119,000, which was an FY24 surplus for GRCSU that was refunded. So there's currently a little over about $540,000 that's being used. This is one-time revenue. So there's three main factors that are state level factors that impact our tax rate. So even after the board approves the expense budget, we then have to look at these factors to determine what the impact is going to be on taxpayers. So we take our education spending, which is up by 3.25%, and we then have to divide it by the equalized pupils. Equalized pupils is a weighted pupil number. So at the beginning of the school year, we take what's called an ADM count, which is our average daily membership, and we provide that information to the state. And the state then weights that data based on several different factors, including poverty, level of education, like secondary, pre-K, elementary, small schools, population density, and they provide an equalized pupils or a long-term weighted ADM number. Rutland Town's pupil count is increasing from last year from 769 to 794, which is a 3.32% increase. Increase in equalized pupils decreases the tax rate. So the spending per pupil is $13,409, which is a 0.7% decrease from last year. The next step in the calculation is to look at the property yield and how that impacts the tax rate. The property yield is something that's set by the legislators each year. We are given a recommendation from the tax commissioner on December 1st, and most districts use that as for purposes of calculating the tax rate. The actual yield isn't decided until late in the legislative session after town meeting, usually in April and May, once most budgets are approved. The recommendation that's being given right now is $8,553. You can't directly compare that to last year's number because the calculation has changed since last year. At the very end of the legislative session last year, the legislators passed a new bill which applies a statewide adjustment factor to both the property yield and the CLA. The the statewide factor this year is 72.36%. So if you were to actually remove that adjustment factor, the new yield would be a 20% increase and would be approximately $11,879. That adjustment factor is applied to both the yield, decreasing the yield, but it increases the CLA. The net impact on the tax rate is 0. So it moves the difference from the yield to the CLA. So we take the spending per pupil and divide it by the property yield to get our equalized tax rate, which is $1.56. And then also passed last session was a cent incentive discount because Rutland Town was negatively impacted by Act 127. The incentive last year was 17 cents, and it lasts for 5 years. Each year it decreases by 20%. However, this is also being adjusted by that statewide adjustment factor of 72.36%. So we take the 17 cents, we times it by 80%, and then we apply that statewide factor, and it's actually an increase in the discount from 17 cents to 18.79%. To 18.79 cents. After we apply that, we have an equalized tax rate of $1.37, almost $1.38. The last step in the calculation is to apply the CLA, which is a common level of appraisal, which compares the fair market value of homes to the assessed value of homes. When those two numbers are equal, CLA is at 100%. As the fair market value increases, the CLA decreases. So last year's CLA was 75.43%. This year's actual CLA before the statewide adjustment factor is 72%. But once we apply that statewide factor, it brings the CLA up to 100.76%. As I said earlier, the yield decreased. The yield should have went up, but it decreased due to the application of that adjustment, and then the CLA is increasing to help offset that. So the estimated tax rate after you apply the CLA is $1.37, which is a 12.93% decrease from last year. And then this last slide is just some information that has been asked in the past as to how much money is being collected in taxes, and of that money, how much is staying in Rutland Town and how much is going to Montpelier. So I've provided several years worth of data here. So in FY23 and FY24, of all the money that was collected in taxes, it all stayed in Rutland Town. Rutland Town actually received money from Montpelier. In FY23 we received $286,000. In 2024 we received $161,000. In FY25, which is the current year, we are not receiving any money from Montpelier. We're actually sending $444,000 to Montpelier out of the money that's being collected. That information is not available for next year's budget yet. That's not decided until after budgets are approved and tax rates are officially set by the treasurer. So we don't have that information to provide at this time.
Based on the new calculations, do you anticipate that shifting differently? I mean, do you understand what?
As far as how much we're sending to Montpelier,
Seemed like the
I don't know enough about the calculation and the grand list and how that all works to give you a positive answer. I would think as your tax rate increases, that's why you last year your tax rate increased significantly, about 12%, and that's why I think attributed to you sending more money to Montpelier because of that increase in the tax rate, where your budget didn't grow enough to substantiate all of that money being used. With your tax rate decreasing 12% this year, I think it might swing back the other way because now you're collecting almost 13% less in taxes, and your budget is increasing your spending is increasing 3%, so you're still gonna have to cover that full budget with 13% less money. So I think it's gonna swing back the other way. Instead of sending money to Montpelier, you'll be receiving money from Montpelier. But I can't be positive about that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Louis, for that presentation.
Well, I got a question slash, I know we already, whatever that's a warrant, whatever we signed that thing. At the time, last board meeting, I had thought that 190 we allocated to the asbestos mitigation was everything, but looking back, I don't think that was. And I don't know the steps. Obviously, we have time between here and March 3rd and actual town meeting hall day, but it sounds like in checking with Kelly, the total cost of the mitigation is around 276,000. So that's like 86,000 more, which I think at this point may be worth us putting that back in the budget to cover the entire mitigation of asbestos this year. I think bottom line, it may cost us like another cent, but we're still going to deliver pretty sizable property tax discount to the property taxpayers. But why do 2/3 of it when we probably should just do it all instead of paying for it later?
I was speaking to Louis and I think taking the fact that the town's budget is up and taxes are going to be higher on that side this year, I do think that we'll have the money to cover the asbestos without having to
From where?
increase. Louis, what were your ideas of how to pay for it if it goes over the budget?
So we're anticipating some money coming in this year due to tuition overcharges due to the allowable process. So we should be getting a sizable refund from that. We also have money in the capital improvement funds as well as our regular repairs line, which could be utilized for some of it.
I feel like they had a plan, so we kind of talked about this, and seeing the town side tonight makes me a little less eager to decrease the decrease. But that's just my opinion. I'm one of 5, so.
Yeah, the 350,000 total is a large sum of money, and we can make do with what we have, with the other money that he said that there's available, and, if next year, we can do some more next year, but get as much done as we can this year with the money that we're allowing.
I think if the town was sitting where they were last year, I would say, yeah, let's do that, but seeing the huge side, the increase on their side, just, they all work together for property taxes, right? So
Sure, but what if everything depends on swings on us next year?
It might, but I think that we have enough money to cover that asbestos entirely with what we already have in there, at least according to a business manager. And
Well, those are potential rebates from overcharging tuition, but if the cost of the carpet's 286 and we have budget of 190, we don't have what's in there. We're just expecting money to show up from somewhere else. Why wouldn't we just budget it all? And if we have a surplus, then we can deliver a revenue increase next year to the property taxpayers or put that back in our capital budget. But I don't think we have a capital expense budget to a reserve fund to mitigate asbestos. It's more like if the boiler blows up. My thoughts. Instead of doing 2/3 of it and still have an over 12% reduction in property taxes. At the time in November when I like you look at the minutes, I said, let's take a look at a 3.5% increase. We had no idea the CLA adjustments at the time. We said, let's look at a 3.5% increase in education spending, and then had Louis manufacture what he could do with the surplus to then that kind of broke up arbitrarily the 190. I think we're sitting in a much better position. Had I known that in November, I would have said, all right, let's mitigate it all and see where it breaks down. But a lot has shifted since that. That's just my feeling.
Abby?
Louis, if you change that and put in the 350.
Well,
all
we
of
already
it.
have 350 in there, right?
Yes, but then if you put all of it in there, or whatever
Added it-
he's asking, the
It-
86,000 more,
86,000 more.
what would the adjusted tax rate
If
be?
I added 150,000, it would increase 2 cents, and our decrease would now be 11.14%.
That's on 150.
That's approximately what would be needed to finish the project.
So, yeah, what's the number? I guess. I asked Kelly, what's the total number, and I got a 276.
His estimate on this 5-year plan was 125,000 a year for 3 years.
But the reason that it was 125 a year for 3 years is because it costs more to do it piecemeal than to do it all at once. So he said there would be a savings if we did all at once.
Correct. But we're not sure what it's gonna cost, because it's been I think a couple of years since we've gotten a quote, and he's been hesitant of getting another quote just because if we ask for a quote for too many times, we may lose vendors that are interested in the project because they won't believe that we're actually moving forward with it. So at the time that he got those numbers, I mean, they're a couple years old, but it was roughly an estimate. It's an estimate, so, but it's 125,000 times 3 years, so 375. If we were to do it all at once, there's potential savings because we can do less testing. Testing is the big part of the cost, and if they only have to come out, if they have to come out fewer times, then the cost is a lot less because there's a minimum charge every time they have to come out and test. So if we're doing one room at a time, it's the same cost to do that one room as it is to do a bulk of rooms.
Yeah, the old quote's $11 per square foot, so it's, on $11 a square foot, it's $240,000 of remediation, plus another $36,000 to replace the rest of the hallway carpets.
So that's your 286, right?
Yeah. $276.
276.
Can I ask a question? Louis, when you said if we were overcharged for tuition, that we can't just use that money though, right? Because usually when there's a revenue, we can't just use that money.
It could be used in the same year, so if we get that refund this year, we can use it this year.
It can? Okay. If we get that refund this fiscal year, we can use it the following fiscal year.
No, we can use it in this current year. As soon as June 30th comes, then that money gets restricted.
But we wouldn't be able to start this before June 30th.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's the case or not.
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, you have to go out to bid and they'd have to start this by June, before June. That would be my concern, is that I don't know if,
So they may be able to do some of the testing at the end of June. I mean, we have 6 months, so. Or there could be other projects that he has lined up to use regular repairs money for next year that he can use. He can do those projects this year and then just save that money from next year's budget. But I mean, if we wanted to look at what 100,000 would be, I mean, I can run any scenario you want, but so, I mean.
What's 100,000?
100,000 is 11.61% decrease. It's about a penny and a half. 100,000, the spending per pupil increase, which is the number that's gonna show up on the ballot, is a 1.27% increase.
What was that, 1.27?
1.27. A spending per pupil of 13,587.
You have any idea how much money you'll be having coming back from the tuition rebate?
I don't have the exact amount, but it should be around 100,000.
But we can only use that if we have it done, if we have everything by June 30th.
It would have to be utilized, if the money comes back this year, they have until, they can give it to us next year as well, and so I'm not sure exactly when we're getting it, at this time. But, so if we get it this year, then we can utilize it by June 30th. And after that, it becomes part of the surplus, which would be a discussion that we have next fall. If they give it to us next year, then we have the ability to use it next year.
Sounds a little bit like we don't know if we'll have the money to, the extra, for sure.
I mean, I'm leaning on the side of making the adjustment, partly because, well, one, we know that, you know, the state's already auditing all the bill, you know, like, we know that that's coming down the pipe, and they're looking at what schools are in the best condition. And then, you know, the select board just stood up here and said, why do we build this fire station? Because we can't defer maintenance, right? So, like,
Well, it was also because their trucks
Yeah.
don't really fit in the other one,
true.
but.
So, I mean, that's just kind of ringing to me. It's like, you know, this is a maintenance factor that I'm pretty sure we've talked about this since I joined the board, you know, 8 years ago. And this is, I feel like, one of the first opportunities that we can make it happen, you know, because we were in previous years talking 2-3% shifts up or down, never an opportunity like this. But.
I know in the 30 years I worked here, the school board would never give me $350,000 to spend on any project, so I think $350,000 is a damn good chunk of money to spend on these projects and get them going and use the other surplus money to get, you can get this, you can spend this money now, for sure.
So
If
you want to
got your
increase
ducks
it
in a
or
row.
not?
What's that?
You want to increase it or not?
No.
But you could be that one person that gave the dream that you wanted.
They can make it work. They can make it work. But that's just my opinion.
Yes. I mean, prices are increasing all the time. I say if we can get it now with a small, I mean, it's not, I mean, still 11.61% decrease in our budget, I would say. I'm leaning towards adding the money. You can't really rely on that money now to say we're gonna have it, because we don't, I mean, there's so many other factors, whether or not it comes before June 30th or not, and then, I don't know, I say go for it.
I think we want it to come after, so then we have more time to use it, right? If it comes after, we have more time to
Yes,
use
but if it doesn't come after,
Right.
then we have to get everything done before, you know what I'm saying, like, there's so many factors up in the air, whether or not we have that money or not.
Let's say we're in a fiscal position to do this. It's 2025. I've been hearing about asbestos since I was a kid. Why don't we just put the money in to get rid of it all? Or remediate it all? I'm
So did you want to?
quite baffled that it's not all gone to begin with. And again, it's
Well,
something I've been
because
learning about.
anything that's underneath the carpet and is encapsulated, you don't have to touch. But they want to put a new flooring in, so that's where you open that can up to do all this other stuff. It's not just the asbestos glue that we're taking up. We want to put down new flooring as well. That's zero maintenance. You don't have to strip it or nothing, you just sweep and mop it. So that's why all this is out there. And I have no problems with that by all means, but
So did you want to make a motion, Colin?
Yeah, I would make a motion that we amend the already passed budget to add back 100,000 towards full remediation of asbestos.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nope.
Is that no? So it's 3 yes, 2 no, motion passes.
So are you gonna make a separate motion on the budget amount? I can give you that number.
Sure.
11 million.
Can you, hold on one second.
So I'll make a motion that we rewarn a total expense of $11,468,468 for the FY '26.
With 35 cents, is that correct? Louis? Sure.
And what?
And 35
I was
cents.
just making sure
And
that was the
35
same
cents.
number
Oh,
you're
no,
gonna.
That's
Make it
right.
flat, 0.
Okay.
So can you just clarify the total amount that would be budgeted for HVAC and the asbestos abatement, Louis?
It's 160,000 for HVAC, 290,000 for asbestos.
Thank you.
And so that'll result in a spending per pupil of 13,587, which is the 1.27% increase. And
Can you
that,
say that again? The,
The 13,587 is the spending per pupil, and that's a 1.27% increase from what you showed us before.
with an estimated tax rate of $1.39, which is an 11.61% decrease.
So,
I have a million, but I didn't know when that was.
do you want to come sit up here with us?
Do we have
not,
to agree? I just,
So you just made a motion
Yes.
to approve, the amount, and then, which will result in per pupil education spending of 13,587, which is 1.27% higher than for the current year, of spending per pupil education. So I will entertain any
I
discussion.
had some questions. I don't know if you want to take those now or later.
Well, I could take it now, I suppose.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. I just, on the website, it had like a little summary of changes, and I'm sorry I couldn't read the screen noise that you had up, but there was a mention about small increases in multiple lines that were underfunded, is a statement. I don't know if that's still true and accurate for this current budget that you're talking about.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay, so I guess I'm just curious to know, how can a line be underfunded and you have a $540,000 or $400,000 surplus in your budget when lines are underfunded? It doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't equate out. I don't think the school has ever had that large of a surplus. $300,000 is the most I've ever seen it. So to hear over $500,000 in surplus, and I know 119 of it was a reimbursement, I think, from the SU. Is that correct, Louis?
The 119 is not part of the 424, that's in addition to.
Repeat that, please.
There was a $119,000 SU refund, but that's not part of the $424,000 surplus. It's in addition to.
Right, which totals 540
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah.
So, but still, $400,000 surplus in a budget. I'm quite, as a taxpayer, I'm really set back by that and shocked, especially after everything we went through last year. I think it was 3 times we had to vote for a budget. It's kind of shocking and kind of disturbing. Fiscally responsible. That's what we're supposed to be. So I'm just saying I'm really set back by that. But my questions are, and I'm just going to go through the budget, point out some things that I had questions, if you can answer them. So on the first thing, I noticed that preschool has an increase in supplies and books, but when I go to direct instruction, which I'm assuming that's the K-8 direct instruction, there's no increase in supplies or books, and I'm just curious on that. But then when I look at I think it's the principal's office, there's an increase in supplies, so I'm just curious to know, and what, you have actual numbers, so I compare those actual numbers of 24, then what was budgeted in 25, and then what you're projected for 26. I'm just curious about those increases
Okay.
in those areas, but then maybe not in the others.
So I'm going to answer that question, but first I want to answer your first comments regarding the surplus. So the surplus was a result of a few different items which I can highlight, but all of our districts have seen larger than normal surpluses during this time of ESSER funds. And that is because with so much ESSER funds available, we weren't tapping the local budget for all new items that came about. If it was eligible under the grant, we utilized the grant first. In addition, we also had some positions that we were able to add into our budget over the course of the years, if they were important positions that we were funding through the grant. And so for many of our districts, for the last year or even 2 years, we were seeing local savings because those positions were budgeted locally and being paid for out of the grant, so that when the grant funds went away, we didn't have to add it into the budget at that time. Those funds were already in the local budget, and so we were having those savings for the last 2 years. So that is the main reason. Also, over the last few years, we've had a lot of difficulty filling positions and having to be creative with positions because the staffing market has been very difficult. So as far as the surplus goes, a large portion of it was salaries and benefits for either savings from ESSER or due to unfilled positions. We also had some tuition savings, which is outside of our control. There was some repair savings for money that was in the budget, but they weren't able to get projects completed because of the lead time for contractors. It's difficult to find contractors. And then there was some transportation savings, and that's what makes up a majority of the surplus. As far as the small increases in individual lines, so when I meet with the administrators each year to go over the budget, one of the things they look at is each individual lines, and many of the lines, if not all of them, have variances, whether it's they underspend them, they overspent them. The budget is just an estimate, and that is an estimate that the principal has to work with for the needs for the school for that year. But one of the exercises, we look at the actuals compared to the budgets, and if we're constantly overspending that budget line, or if we know that budget line is not going to be sufficient for that year, and we're not talking about the budget as a whole, but these small budget lines, knowing that with inflation and prices increasing, the principal will look at individual lines and say, oh, we need to increase this line a little bit because maybe we added a program, or we know prices are going up, or we've been close to spending that full budget line each year, so let's increase it. And they're not increases that are all large enough or noteworthy enough to make it into the highlights of the budget. So we just lumped them in as, okay, there was a bunch of lines that maybe it was $500 here or $1,000 there that were increased just to help fund those individual lines. As far as your last question regarding the supplies, so I think looking at the actuals to compare to the budget amounts, two of those lines, the ones that were increased, pre-K was increased by $500, and so was the principal lines. The actuals were not exceeding the budget, but were fairly close to that budget line. Whereas in the direct instruction supply line, there was a budget of $50,000, but the actuals that were spent were only $41,000. So there was $9,000 in money that was not spent. So there was not a need to increase that budget line.
Okay, and in insurance buyouts, are you guessing how many of those are, or do you have a more solid figure about what that looks like?
So all health insurance is, I mean, it's a guesstimate based on employees that are employed at the time, based on the plans that they are taking or not taking. So we're just kind of making some assumptions based on what we know today.
And I'm talking about the insurance buyout. I'm not talking about the insurance plans and the wages and things like that. I'm saying insurance buyout itself. So if you don't take the school's insurance, you get a buyout.
Correct.
Are you estimating that, or are you like, we have those numbers, like these people are still employed, this is what they did
We are
last year?
estimating it based on the information that we have today for the employees that are taking that buyout.
Okay. On the second page, I guess I'm looking at guidance, your supplies, books, and periodicals. Like, you were at like 1,900, and you're going to like close to 3,000.
Repeat that page again? What? fund you-
That's on second page. It's up at the top. There's a long list of, it's in the guidance services.
Okay.
Just saying.
Books, it looks like there was nothing budgeted, under guidance for books, there was nothing budgeted, we increased the budget to 400?
Yes, right, supplies looks like in '24, it was 1,580, 1,600, let's just say.
Yep.
You know, obviously you budgeted for 15, you didn't increase that, and you didn't increase any, you didn't factor anything for books or periodicals for last year, or this current year, but you're jumping from about 1,900 to 3,000. It's a pretty large increase in, and I'm not directing my questions at you, Louis. I mean, you're, just the money guy, but this is the board, I guess. That's a pretty large increase. It's almost double, not quite, but it's a pretty fair increase in that. So I just kind of wondering about
Marcia, can I
that.
just ask, so you're under guidance services on
Yes.
page 2?
Yes,
I just want to make, I'm not, for professionals,
for supplies, book, and then there's books and.
supplies, yep.
Supplies, books, and periodicals. There's 2 lines there. Which I understand, like, obviously you didn't budget for the books and periodicals. You want to put money in the budget.
So
That
we
makes sense, but I'm just.
yeah, we increased the supplies, the supply line by 1,000. Yeah, and that's, I think, for some of our needy students too.
Oh, okay.
That we need some things for.
So when you're talking about supplies, you're talking about that. You're not talking about necessarily office supplies.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That clarifies it. Thank you. For health services, it talks about substitutes there. Is that the line for actual substitutes or?
For the nurse.
Oh, just for the nurse?
Correct. So the
Oh,
nurse
okay.
sub rate had to go up a little bit
Yeah.
because when they compared what other area schools were paying, it was much more. So that has helped us get at least one more nurse sub, which has been great.
Yeah, I just was, I wasn't sure.
No, good question.
Substitutes, if it was like the
It's
rest.
just the nurse sub.
Substitutes or other places.
And we've overspent that the last few years.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And down in technology services, same page, there's SU purchase services, an increase of 26,275. I just was curious to know what that is.
So that is mostly,
question.
it is a combination, it's a combination of both software programs that are maintained at the SU level because all of our schools are using them, as well as the infrastructure, technology infrastructure for internet and voice services. So those are paid for at the SU level because we receive quite a bit federal reimbursement for those. The increase is due to the fact that we've been subsidizing some of our software programs with ESSER funds for the last few years, and now the ESSER funds running out, those SU, some of those programs that are SU programs like EduClimber or Jump Rope or whatever, those are now
Infinite
being-
Campus.
Infinite,
Right.
those are being pushed down to the local levels.
And right above that, communications, it's a pretty big decrease. Like, it looked like in '24, it was
So that is just a
3,000, and then
shift.
we went way up to 15,000, and now we're back to 3,000?
So it's just an accounting shift. It's now being covered under that SU purchase service line.
Okay, okay, you put it in there.
So that large increase is not the full increase. That's partially offset by that 12,000.
Okay, on page 3, I was curious to know the percentage that the administrators, it looks like principal's office wages is, the town had like a 3% increase for the employees, and I was curious to know what the percent increase is for the administration.
So that is actually just based on actuals.
Just
That is
actuals.
based on actual salaries today.
Today, okay.
But it's based on this year's salaries.
And it's $11,000 more? Do you mean the increase they got this year was just added into the budget, the same for next year? Is that what you
Correct. So
mean?
the increases are not directly in those lines so for the year in advance. So the increase that you're seeing is based on this year's increase that they.
Okay, so if they got 4% increase, you factored it in, but it's not set for next year.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Down under fiscal services, what is cash flow note interest? I was just curious to know what that is.
So each year, districts have to get a tax anticipation note, which is a short-term loan to help fund their cash flow. And so that's the interest that we pay on that loan.
Got it. And then down under plant operations, under repair and maintenance services, it's like halfway down that. It's up about 30,000. It was 62.
Hang on, Marcia, hang on.
Oh, sorry.
No, so underwater sewer, that one?
Right under water sewer, yeah,
So
repair and
62
maintenance
is,
services.
62 is what we paid last
Actual.
year, but we didn't increase that line. It was 95 last year, and it's 95 again.
And we did not purchase things because we were told to hold off on maintenance.
Okay.
Because
So
we had-
kept
yeah.
it there, okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
And then we found out this fall that there was a surplus, so we did not, there were things that we were hoping to do, but we were told to pull back on the reins.
Yeah.
Grounds maintenance is an increase from last year's budgeted, 4,000. We usually, grounds maintenance, I thought do we contract out? Maybe, no?
We do for some things, but this is to help with some of the fields out
Oh.
back, like the athletic fields. We need to do some maintenance and put a
Okay.
little more money in. We talked, I think in the fall about the softball field a little bit and doing.
It's in our goals, by the way.
It's one of the board goals.
Yeah.
If you don't want me to answer these.
No, I do.
Fix the concrete field in the back. Make it dirt.
On page 4, under, you spoke about the transportation expense, and, can you just shortly
What line are you
review
on?
why-
The transportation one?
Yeah, what
The
happened
one that
with
says
that? Like, there's a
transportation.
decrease, so, I would think cost of mile, or, gas, or diesel, whatever buses run on, would be an increase, so.
Yes, so we receive a portion of all of our transportation expense back from the state as a reimbursement. And it's approximately 45% that we receive back. But the reimbursement is a lag. It's, I think it's a 2 or 3 year lag. And so we saw a pretty large increase in our transportation expense a few years ago because we had to rebid our contract. And so the reimbursement's starting to catch up on that. And so we're seeing more revenue that's offsetting the expense.
And where are like the field trips or Lifetime Sports? I don't know if Chingacook's back in here. I know
They're on the
eighth
very
grade's off.
last page, under co-curricular,
Co-curricular, oh, I see it here.
dues and fees and co-curricular transport. That's the 7th grade trip and Lifetime Sports.
I'm sorry, repeat that, Louis.
It's the 7th grade trip and Lifetime Sports.
Co-curricular transport
The dues and fees and the co-curricular transport.
includes both of those things. Okay. I'm just, I'll say this again, and I don't care, but I will just say that I noticed that the supplies are increased for preschool, supplies are increased for guidance, for principal's office. It looks like even plant management supplies are, but the direct instruction, I know you say there's 9,000, but there's also, 30 teachers. I think that's interesting that, you're increasing the supplies for all those different areas, but then for that direct instruction, it's not, it's staying the same. So I just, but I wanted to comment on that, and I appreciate you entertaining my questions. So, thank you, that's it, actually,
Well,
Thanks.
to that point on that, just encourage your fellow teachers. We budgeted 50, you spent 41. So that's part of the surplus. That's why we didn't increase it, because we're not spending all of the money. So if there is a kickback in the teaching community, there's money to be spent on supplies, because we did not hit the line item, so.
And I'll just say that as a teacher, I'm speaking, I get told I get this amount in my budget, and that's what I get paid. And yeah, I could go and ask Sarah, like, oh, can I get this? Can I get this? But we are told as teachers, like, this is the amount, your budget for it. And so, I mean, as teachers, we're told that. We aren't aware if there's a surplus. Like, if I wish I knew there was $9,000, I could buy a whole, I have a lot of stuff I could think of I could use in my classroom and in 6th grade or even middle school. So, that's not relayed to us at a teaching level either. So, just to give you that input too. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other comments? So I think that we were in the middle of a, Colin had made a motion to approve the warning. So Article 1, I'll just read it again. Shall the voters of Rutland Town School District approve the school board to expend $11,468,468.35, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. The Rutland Town School District estimates that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in per pupil education spending of $13,587, which is 1.27% higher than per pupil education spending for the current year. And Article number 2 is to elect other school district officials as required by law, 1 for 2 years and 1 for 3 years. So, any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. 4 yes, 1 no. All right.
Do we want to print that and sign it tonight?
I think that we do, right? All right.
This will be the final one.
They'll send it to me.
So if there are no other comments online or in the room, we are at the end of the meeting, so I will move to adjourn at 9:02. Good night, everyone.